Hey, I'm Freddy Pow Pow, and I'm about to DM a full-length D&D campaign for the first time ever. I've DM'd one-shots before. I've done longer sessions with Monster Hearts. Like I did a Monster Hearts one-shot that ended up being 4 sessions. But this is gonna be the first time that I've DM'd a full-length campaign module. So I'm making this video series to document what happens. I'm going to be doing another entry between every session where I go over what I'm planning for the next session, ideas that I have, what I've prepared, and also going over stuff from the last session about how those preparations turned out working or turned out failing me. The idea for this is that there's a lot of resources out there right now from people who are really good DMs teaching their skills to newer players, or newer DMs, I should say. But I don't know of a series that's just about someone who is DMing for the first time and just watching them go through that process and just kind of, stumbling through it, what works, what doesn't, that kind of stuff. And I figured it could be nice for newer DMs because there's a lot of content out there of actual plays and stuff where you get to see someone who's really good at DMing do a really good job DMing. So it can be kind of stressful thinking that you need to live up to that kind of expectation, the Matt Mercer effect. So I'm making this series where we watch me do this for the first time and realize that if it's your first time, it's gonna be weird and wonky, and just kind of demystifying the whole thing. So like I said, I'm gonna be running a campaign module. I'm gonna be running Call of the Netherdeep because I already had the book because Wizards of the Coast sent it to me for a promo I did for TikTok. And this first video is just going to be me introducing the stuff I've prepared before the campaign started, what the characters are going to be, and I guess next video we'll see how much of it worked. So first things first, let's talk about the campaign itself. I've read through about the first half of Call of the Netherdeep, but then I got overwhelmed because I was like, I'm not gonna remember all this. I don't need to know all this yet. Why bother memorizing it now? There's a part in it where it branches off between you can join 3 different factions and there's quest lines for each of those. And I don't know who they're joining yet, so I don't need to know that yet. I've skimmed through to the end to see what the big beats are and who the big players are and stuff like that. But I am mostly focused on the very beginning part of it for now. In fact, I'm not actually focused on anything that happens in Call of the Netherdeep right now, because Call of the Netherdeep starts at level 3, and it kind of assumes that you already are a party, which makes sense. One of the big gimmicks to that module is that you have a second rival adventuring party that kind of has a parallel adventure to yours. And they're already an established group. My campaign is going to have 5 players, and I have played with all of them before, but there are varying degrees of experience. There's 3 people who have played a lot, and there's 2 people who have not. For one of them, this is going to be their second D&D campaign ever. So I wanted it to start at level 1 so that we would have some time to get acquainted with the characters. They could build up a party dynamic. And so when they get into Call of the Netherdeep proper and they are meeting this other adventuring party, they themselves already are a full adventuring party, both as characters and as players. So I'm actually going to be starting them with one of the adventures from Explorer's Guide to Wildemount. It's recommended in Netherdeep if you're starting from level 1. It's the adventure that starts in Xhorhas. So we're going to be starting there. I don't know if you all want me to get into the details of the specific plot of the module. I don't know if that's particularly relevant to what I'm trying to do, but if you think that that would be helpful going forward, then let me know in the comments and I'll try to work in more about plot synopsis and plot details for the module going forward. Next, let's talk about the characters that we have playing. Like I said, we've got 5. We are looking at a Satyr Fathomless Warlock, a Dhampir Way of the Mercy Monk, a Changeling / Hexblood College of Tragedy Bard, a Fairy Path of Wild Magic Barbarian, and a Tabaxi Ranger who hasn't picked their subclass yet, which is fine because they're starting at first level. I am going to tell you about the backstories that each of them gave me, and then I'll explain how I'm planning on working those backstories into this already established module. Some of them I'm going to try to get in a little bit earlier on, but most of them I feel like I'll put in some details earlier on, but we're not really going to get into the meat of their backstory until probably after we finish the module. I haven't quite decided how I want to do this yet, but we'll find out as we go along. Okay, we will start with the satyr warlock. His name is Bash. And from now on, I'm just going to refer to the characters by their character names. Bash is a male satyr born in the Feywild. I'm not going to read this entire thing, it's kind of long. But the spark notes of it are this. Bash is a big partier. He just likes to have fun and fuck around, both literally and figuratively. One day, he stumbled across a human traveler in the woods. He was trying to hook up with this guy named Nero. And then Nero just kind of led him over into a cult compound. Bash partied with a group of strangers, not realizing that they were all worshippers of the god Dendar. Then while he was blackout drunk, Nero convinced him to pledge his allegiance to Dendar. Bash was down for anything to get laid, so after an extensive blood ritual, or whatever he vaguely remembers as foreplay, he devoted himself to Dendar to destroy all of humanity. Woke up, decided to leave because he was bored of being there, decides to pull a prank on everyone because pranks are his love language, where he sews the tents shut with his friends in them and lights a campfire on a windy day. And he describes his relationship to his patron as like, the patron is saying, hey, go do these destructive things, destroy humanity. And Bash is like, you got it, boss, and does a dumb prank on someone. So they've got a very silly dynamic. And I think it's a lot of fun, and I think there's a lot that I can do with that. First of all, definitely Nero is going to show back up with like his face like half covered in burn scars, you know? Like, he's really given me a good setup to bring those characters back. The one thing I did change is that Dendar is a Forgotten Realms god, I'm pretty sure. So I just kind of swapped in Uk'otoa from Exandria, since Uk'otoa is like the big giant serpent god who has an already established like cult of worshippers. And I think that's a solid place to start with his character. Some stuff that I'm thinking about for the future is, again, bringing back Nero at some point with like, here are the consequences of your actions of a pretty dangerous prank. Also, something I realized while I was reading up on backstory stuff and world lore is that one of the groups that's responsible for sealing away Uk'otoa's temples is the Allegiance of Allsight. And the Allegiance of Allsight is a like primary faction in Call of the Netherdeep. So I'm thinking of at some point when they reach that point of the campaign, you know, maybe some of the Allegiance members witness what Bash's magic looks like, and they recognize like the Uk'otoa influence in it. And they're like, I don't know about all that. I don't know specifics yet, but I feel like that's something that I can work in. Second thing I was thinking of is that, you know, that relationship between him and his patron of the patron wants him to destroy the world, and he instead does funny pranks, might not be sustainable. Somewhere in his storyline, it might turn out that Uk'otoa can't be his patron anymore, and I want to go ahead and start thinking about that eventuality, or possibility. And my first thought is because he's so focused on pranks and finding enjoyment in that, and just using his patron magic to fuck around with people, that it might make sense that if he needs a new patron to swap in the Traveler, because that's already the Traveler's whole thing. And I feel a little bit bad because I feel like I would be using both Uk'otoa and the Traveler, who are two of the main Exandria gods who came up in Critical Role Season 2 with being Ford and Jester's patrons. I don't want to just like copy Critical Role. Like, I know I'm doing a CR like campaign, but I don't want to just be like, what if I did Critical Role, you know? But I do feel like they're the two gods who make the most sense for Bash's character. So I feel like I'm not like just copying what CR did. I feel like I'm trying to organically pick the gods that make the most sense for his character. And if they happen to be the same ones, you know, that's just how it goes. But right now, that's what I have in store for Bash, and we'll see what happens. One other quick wrench that got thrown into the plans is that the player who would be running Bash, he actually just tested positive for COVID, so he is going to miss the first session, which pains me, but the way scheduling works out for everyone, if we don't do it tomorrow, then we won't do it for like 5 weeks. So his character, we're gonna meet him on the road. Next up, let's talk about the Dhampir monk. His name is Eric Tempest, and again, I'll just give a synopsis of his backstory and then what I'm thinking of how to work it into the existing narrative. This character is based somewhat on Blade, so if you hear this and you're like, that's Blade, you're a little bit right. Eric was born in a brothel in the city of Amman on the continent of Taldore to heiress Vanessa Tempest. She begins to experience labor complications. A doctor is called. The doctor turns out to be a vampire who kills several of the workers and Vanessa, drains their blood. In heiress Tempest's case, however, this inadvertently passed along vampire enzymes to her baby son as he was born. And that's Eric. So that's how he ends up as a Dhampir. Doesn't know his biological father's location or his existence. Eric is raised in the brothel. When he was 12 years old, a patron of the brothel attacked one of the workers, and Eric's Dhampir powers came out as he attacked them in a fit of rage. From that day on, the hunger began to consume him. He no longer needed to eat or breathe, just to feed. Mistress Vaughn tells him the truth of his birth. He feeds on animals. He realizes that he doesn't feed on blood, he feeds on life force, which, is one of the options in Ravenloft. Blood, fresh or raw meat, spinal fluid, dreams, life energy. A lot of fun things that Dampiers can eat. Later on, age of 16, he witnesses a vampire attack again in Amon against an elderly man. Intervenes, fights the creature, but then also feeds on the elderly man. Feels guilt, returns to the brothel, tells Mistress Vaughn that he's leaving, that he's going to go avenge his mother and anyone's a victim of evil. Sets out, becomes a warrior, masters weapons, fights monsters. Pretty Blade-esque. Which is fine, because I vigorously believe that there's nothing wrong with playing a character that is heavily inspired or based on another character. The problem for me comes when you are playing that character. Like, if you're playing a character that's like similar to Naruto or pulls a lot of inspirations from Naruto, fine, cool. If you're playing literally Naruto and just like shoving him into a different world, that's where it doesn't work. But this is an original character. Like, sure, it has a lot of similarities to an existing character, but he's not trying to match the personality or story beats or anything like that. The only gap that was really here for me to fill in his backstory was I put in a little bit about who the vampire that attacked his mother was. He specifically left that open-ended and was like, a vampire, some sort of important person, whoever you want. So I filled in some details about that. And I'm not super sure about how to work this backstory in with the module-like narrative. It feels like going to confront the vampire that killed his mother is a very big arc. I feel like that's not something that they can do on the way to something else, So I feel like that's going to be something that takes place after the module ends if we continue playing forward. I might have some vampire spawn sent after him, like during their downtime sections. Like, there's bits in Call of the Netherdeep where it's like something happens, then you finish this quest, and then you get notified of the next part of it a week later in world time. So maybe I'll work some like vampire attacks in there. I looked up the stat block for a vampire, just a normal vampire, and they definitely can't fight that for a while. So I might hold on to that one for like after the campaign to really get into it. I also haven't quite decided what I'm going to do with his birth father yet. He specifies that he doesn't know his biological father's location or existence. So I'm on the fence about whether or not he was killed or if I want to bring him back as a surprise later. And I don't think that's a decision I need to make now, so I'm not going to. Maybe I'll save it for if they do fight the vampire that killed his mother. That's if it goes very, very badly, his dad will be a little deus ex machina to help them out. I don't know. But that's what I got for Eric so far. So we'll move on. Next up, we'll talk about the Fairy Barbarian. This is the only one where I don't have the backstory written up in front of me, so we're just going to be trying to remember this one. But this is Messulina de Avalon. Again, Fairy, Wild Magic Barbarian. Path of Wild Magic Barbarian? You know the one. But her backstory is that she was a princess in the Feywild. One day her family was attacked. She was tucked away to safety while the rest of her family was killed by the attackers. She believes that the attackers are still looking to exterminate the entire family tree, so she has gone into hiding. There's also some sort of old love interest who's being kind of like left up to me to decide. Specifically, he isn't a fairy or royalty. He's like star-crossed lovers from different worlds. But she doesn't know what happened to him after her family was killed. So there's room to figure out if he had a role, in that. Like, did his family come after hers? Was he just trying to get in close to, stage this attack? How much of a role does he play in the death of her family? There's a lot of stuff to work with here. This is the backstory of the 5 that I think is the most open-ended and gives me the most room to, add stuff and tweak however I need. One other thing that I think is going to be really cool with this character, and I'm super excited to see how it plays out, is that Path of... Let me make sure I get the name actually right. Path of Wild Magic Barbarian. I think I already said that one, but I was doubting myself, and now I know. At level 3, they get a feature where every time they go into a rage, they roll on a wild magic table of 8 different effects that also happen on top of the rage. Like, if they roll a 4, magic infuses one weapon of your choice that you are holding until your rage ends. The weapon's damage type changes to force, and it gains the light and thrown properties with a normal range of 20 feet and a long range of 60 feet. If the weapon leaves your hand, the weapon reappears in your hand at the end of the current turn, which is sick. But she's going to be role-playing it as every time she goes into a rage and rolls on that table, it's going to be one of her dead family members possessing her body. This was an idea that I suggested mostly probably because I was playing a lot of Guilty Gear Plus R at the time, and I play Zappa, and he gets possessed by ghosts a lot, so it was on my brain. But she was super into the idea, and I'm very stoked to see how that one goes. This is also a backstory, though, that I haven't plan to work in much yet. The ex-lover, I think, is probably going to be my first avenue to work it in. Maybe some dream sequences with the dead family. But I don't have an end goal for this yet. I don't have an end game planned out for how her story goes. So it's a little backburnered for now. And I can definitely work in like how she's still being hunted by the people who attacked her family. So I think that's probably where most of it's going to be, actually. That's probably how we're going to find out about it first, is the party will probably be attacked by people hunting her. But other than that, not a lot of plans. Not a lot of plans. But that's okay. That's okay. We've got a whole campaign to work with. Moving on, 2 more characters to go. Next up, we have Felurian Cordelia, who is the changeling / hexblood College of Tragedy bard. We've got a Dampier, we've got a hexblood. Messalina's background was Haunted One. We are really getting a lot of mileage out of the Ravenloft book. I told my players that Call of the Netherdeep like gets a little bit spooky and like horror themed at times, and they took that as this is a horror campaign. I also mentioned that there's a few like underwater combat segments and stuff like that, and like 3 of these characters can breathe underwater now. It's not important, but I think it's funny. Anyway, Felurian, her backstory. Mig, her true name, was taken from her parents when she was just a baby. Her family now consists of 2 hags, Gladys and Vivian. They live in a small cottage in the middle of the woods near Feywild Crossing. They told Mig that's where she came from and that she is destined for greater things. She's just spent her entire life with these 2 hags for the most part. They taught her everything that she knows. As she got older, Gladys and Vivian let her in on a little secret. They had been trying for hundreds of years without success to find a 3rd member to complete their coven, and after all that time, it turns out that Mig fits perfectly as that person. Mig gladly accepts it, gets the little crown, and that's how she becomes a hexblood. For the next 30 years, she has a great time. She's doing fun hag stuff. She's assuming different identities to play pranks on a nearby town. A nameless beggar spreading disease, a helpless maiden luring unsuspecting gentlemen into traps, and her favorites, a mysterious and enchanting sorceress named Felurian Cordelia, who is how she's presenting herself for this campaign. One day, she wakes up to find that Gladys and Vivian are gone, as if they had never existed. Now, at the ripe age of 60, she's back to starting from square one, and now she's left her cottage in her favorite form, hiding from the world, the broken crown embedded in her wrinkled head, and taking on the young, voluptuous form of Felurian. There wasn't much that I needed to add to her backstory to tie it into the world. The only thing was that she said that she lived in a small cottage in the middle of the woods near Feywild Crossing. I just put that, we agreed on the Siren Green Forest, because that is literally just kind of enchanted woods. And then we said that the town that she went to play pranks was Diastock. I don't think that's going to come up, but it's good to have. The main hook that I get to work with for this backstory is, what happens to Gladys and Vivian? They disappeared. She doesn't know what happened. Neither do I yet. But I don't need to. Again, a lot of these are probably going to be later on down, and I might just be procrastinating a little bit, but I don't want to decide everything before we even start playing. I want to see how stuff goes. We did have to do a little bit of homebrew because she's both a changeling and a hexblood, and both of those already have stuff. And what we agreed on, mechanic-wise, she's going to take pretty much everything just from the hexblood side of it. And hexbloods already gets the ability to cast Disguise Self through their hex magic traits. In terms of the changeling stuff, we just kind of decided that the process of transforming to and from her true original form, instead of just being a normal quick disguise action, that's going to be a ritual cast. But mechanically, for the most part, she's going to be playing the hexblood side of it. And really, there's not much else that I have prepped for her for day 1, so I don't think I have much else to add for Felurian right now, other than I need to figure out how to put College of Tragedy stuff into D&D Beyond. Could be a hassle. We'll see what happens. But let's go ahead and move on to our 5th and final character. Last up, we have the Tabaxi Ranger, Esme Pollock. Specifically, a hairless Tabaxi. This is the only player who hasn't already picked their subclass, which is fine. We're level 1, she has 2 more levels to do it. And she wanted to kind of feel out the world and the environment before she locked in on what subclass to play. I don't think I've mentioned this yet. This group of players is almost identical to another group that I'm currently playing in. Everyone except Messalina's player, the rest of us are all currently playing a Witchlight campaign, and Felurian's player is DMing that. We're going to be alternating weeks of which campaign we're doing, which I think is hilarious. But anyway, Felurian's player did something while we were playing. One of us is playing an Echo Knight, and leading up to level 3 when he got it, he would like notice stuff out of the corner of his eye, and it would be like his shadow like doing stuff on its own. And then level 3 was when he was able to like mechanically interact with it. So I thought it was fun to be able to like tease people's subclasses leading up to them getting it. I already have ideas for how I might be doing that with Eric and with Messalina, so I'm not worried about it. Anyway, back to Esme's actual backstory. So she's a negotiator for the Pollock family, not of noble descent. The Pollock family is like a noble family involved in organized crime. No biological siblings, dead parents, question mark, but is the adopted child of this noble mob family. She has had one steamy lover from long ago, didn't quite work out, and came to the current location of the start of this campaign on a mission to pick something up. Esme doesn't really know what it is, she just knows that it's very important that this job goes off without a hitch. And that was our starting point. So right off the bat, I made up the family for her, the Pollock family, and said that they were important figures in the Myriad, which is already an established like organized crime syndicate in Exandria. I wrote up bios for like her parents, her adopted sister, a little blurb on the lover. We settled on her hometown being Zadash because that's already kind of like a big city with an organized crime presence. Originally, when we talked about it, she was just from a noble family, so we put her as being from Rosona and had her being from one of the dens there. But then later on, she came back with wanting to have ties to organized crime, so that was what prompted me to suggest moving to Zadash, where we already had the syndicate going on. So she's here to pick something up. She doesn't know what it is. I decided to add in little bits about how all she knows is that it's some kind of mineral of strange power and importance, and that's all she was told. And that, I think, works our way into Call of the Netherdeep pretty well, because it's going to be ruidium, which is a strange mineral that's been popping up in Exandria because of the events of Call of the Netherdeep. So I think that's a good way to motivate her into the Call of the Netherdeep campaign. And I think that we still have a lot of avenues to work with stuff like the lover from her past and the organized crime aspect, how she fits in with her family, stuff like that. It doesn't already have like a clear like end goal to her backstory the same way that Eric's does, where it's like you find the vampire that killed your mother, you probably kill him. Esme doesn't have that kind of like clear trajectory for it, but I think that it's still something that we can just kind of discover on the way through the campaign. So that's all the characters briefly summarized for you. So now let's get into what I have prepared for the first session for everyone meeting each other and getting started. So we're starting at level 1 with the Unwelcome Spirits mini adventure from Explorer's Guide to Wildmount. The overall arc of this adventure is that the adventurers start in a town called Urzin, which is a settlement in the Broken Vale Marsh that's built on the back of a bunch of live horizon-backed tortoises, which is dope. They get a request from the head of the town, who is Ogre Lord Bufal II, saying basically his most trusted counselor went into the woods like 3 days ago and hasn't come back. Please go find her. They do this little hex crawl going across the map, eventually ending up at this fort that is controlled by the Dwendalian Empire. What happens there depends on how long it takes them to get through the Broken Vale Marsh to that place. But then they either rescue the counselor or fight her or whatever has to happen there, and then they come back. They hit level 2 when they reach the fort, and they hit level 3 when they get back. In my experience with the one-shots that I've run, everything takes longer than I expect it to. My guess for how far we're going to get in this first session is we're going to meet all of our adventurers, we're going to speak to the Ogre Lord, get the job, head out into the swamp, and then do maybe one encounter in the swamp. That's what I think we're going to get through. There's a table of possible encounters in the Broken Vale Marsh while they're exploring. I tried to get minis for as many of the random encounter possibilities as I could, but there's 12 of them, and I only have, so much money and so much time to try to paint minis. But I got a few, and for the rest, I have these little guys. What I've prepared in general is that I've familiarized myself with the town, with the NPCs that they can run into during this first little section before they leave Urzin. I've written an introduction to do at the beginning of the campaign, introducing everybody to the world and all that stuff. At first, I tried to come up with individual vignettes of meeting each character where they're staying in Urzin and then working them towards the Ogre Lord's Hall. But I thought about how stuff like that has gone in previous stuff that I've run and concluded that it will take so long if I do something like that. So instead, we're going to be meeting the characters as they're arriving at the hall. I've bought a few things in preparation for the campaign. I've tried to buy minis for all the player characters. That's not what this one was, but this was in arm's reach. I got these for NPCs and enemies that I don't have minis for. I got a dry erase map thing that's not in arm's reach right now, but I do have it. And I spent some time trying to paint stuff in preparation, but I sure didn't finish that in time. But I think they'll forgive me. I've been looking through music for underscoring different scenes. I have picked out the song to loop for the intro sequence, but I do need to find one more song that I want to just have as kind of like the backdrop for Urzin, the settlement. One more for just walking through the swamp, and then maybe a couple for battle sequences. And I have a bunch of resources that I'm looking at right now. I'm looking at Arcane Anthems, looking through his albums, looking through just Spotify, like fantasy playlists. I have some music from Monument Studios that they sent me a while back for a promotion I did for them. So I've got options. I just still need to like actually pick the things. One thing that I haven't done yet, and I know that I should, but I might be stupid and not do it in time, is I haven't come up with a list of like names for extra NPCs that might show up, just in case they go somewhere that I have no idea what it is and I just need to put someone there. I should have a list of potential NPC names. I don't have that. It's very silly of me, but I might not do that before the session, and we'll see if I regret that. But overall, I feel like I've done about as much prep as I can, but I also feel very underprepared. Like I feel like something's going to go off the rails or something's going to go wrong, or they're going to do something that I have no idea what it's going to be. And I feel like it's going to take me by surprise and I'm going to be like a deer in the headlights, but I've just got to stick with it. I've done a lot of improv. I'm no stranger to making stuff up on the fly. It's just, this is the first time that I've had this kind of pressure on me as like the person running the game, you know? But I feel like I've done all that I could. And maybe you're watching this now and being like, Freddie didn't plan for this. This is going to come back and bite him in the butt. And if that's true, you'll find out on the next episode of this when I debrief everything that went wrong in the previous session. But I think that's everything that I have to talk about for this first episode. So if you're still watching, thank you for still watching and making it to the end. This episode is probably going to be longer than the episodes are going to be going forward because I went through every player character and their backstory and stuff like that. But I'm really excited to start this campaign tomorrow. Jeez, I still have other things to do. And I hope you enjoy going on this journey with me as I find out what works and what doesn't. I don't have a sign off yet. I haven't decided on that. So if you have suggestions, leave them in the comments. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff, yada, yada, you know, YouTube sign off. And thank you for watching.